Okay, these are going to be the notes for, again, the special right triangles. This time we are going to do what's called a 30, 60, 90 right triangle. So last time we did a 45, 45, 90 right triangle. And again, remember a 45, 45, 90 was based on a square. You just split it diagonally. And to get from the leg to the hypotenuse of a 45, 45, 90, you just multiply by the square root of 2. So you don't have to do Pythagorean theorem. If you were to go from the hypotenuse back down to the leg, you would divide by the square root of 2. So this is what we did previously. So I'm using the same set of notes, but now you're doing what's called a 30, 60, 90 right triangle. All right? So, again, there's special rules that go with this type of triangle. You don't have to use Pythagorean theorem. Everything is based off of what's called the small or the short leg and the large leg and the hypotenuse. So you're going to see here in a second when I explain this, this is considered the short leg. To go from the short leg to the hypotenuse, you multiply by 2. So if the short leg was 3, 3 times 2, the hypotenuse would be 6. To go from the short leg to what's called the long leg, you'll see that in a second when I break everything down, you simply multiply by the square root of 3. All right? So, if you're in class with me, we are going to draw an equilateral triangle. So remember, if it's an equilateral triangle, we went over this before, all sides are equal, but all angles are exactly 60 degrees. So with an equilateral triangle, all sides are the same, but all angles are 60 degrees. Now, what that basically means is, if this side was 4 centimeters, all sides would be 4. And you can figure out everything based off just one side. Okay, a 30, 60, 90 triangle comes from an equilateral triangle that has been split down the middle. So what I would want you to do is split this straight down the middle in half. When you do that, you've just made a right triangle. But you've also cut this side in half. So this side is now 2. This is known as the short leg. Why? Because it's smaller. Now, technically speaking, I don't need this side of the triangle because it's identical. You get 2 identical right triangles. This piece here is called the long leg. Why is it called the long leg? Because it's longer than the other one. This piece here is still the hypotenuse, but look at the relationship between the short leg and the hypotenuse. In order to go from the short leg to the hypotenuse, you multiply by 2. In order to go from the hypotenuse down to the short leg, you would divide by 2. That's the relationship. It's a 1 to 2 relationship. Now, I'm going to call the long leg A, and I'm going to do Pythagorean theorem, but you'll notice that this will always work. If we did Pythagorean theorem, it'd be a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Okay, I don't know what the a is. That's the long leg. But I do know that the b was 2, and I do know that the hypotenuse, or the c, was 4. So I've got a squared plus 2 times 2 is 4. 4 times 4 is 16. Now, what would I do to get a by itself? Subtract 4. 16 minus 4 is 12, and again, a squared equals 12. How do you get rid of a square? You square root it. If you square root the left, you square root the right. But I'm looking for 2 numbers that when multiplied give me 12. I'm going to use 4 and 3. 3 is prime, circle it. Why do I like 4? I can get a pair of 2's. So what I have is the long leg is 2 times radical 3. Where did I see that 2? It was the same number right here. So what you do to go from the short leg to the long leg is simply multiply by radical 3. So whatever the short leg is, multiply by radical 3, that's the long leg. You don't need Pythagorean theorem. If you had to go from the long leg back down to the short leg, the opposite of multiplying by radical 3 is simply dividing by radical 3. And there's your rules right there. All right? So, I could turn this triangle sideways. It does not matter. All right, 5 is the short leg. Again, if this used to be an equilateral triangle, think about it. This would have been 5. Wouldn't all the sides have been 10? The rule to go from the short leg to the hypotenuse is times 2. 5 times 2 is 10. The rule to go from the short leg to the long leg is multiplied by radical 3. So x is equal to 5 times radical 3. There's your two answers right there. You do not need Pythagorean theorem. All right? Same thing. This is the short leg. The short leg is always with the 60, by the way. Okay, and usually you can tell just by looking at it. It's a shorter leg. To go from short leg to hypotenuse, multiply by 2. So 7 times 2 is 14. To go from short leg to long leg, you just multiply by radical 3. So x is equal to 7 radical 3. Now this one's different. X is the short leg. Y is the long. There is no way to just jump across here. Everything's based off that hypotenuse and that short leg relationship. All right? So this is the hypotenuse. To go back down to the short leg, remember the hypotenuse has to be the biggest number. You divide by 2. So x has to be 4. To go from short leg to long leg, you multiply by radical 3. So this is 4 radical 3. Again, there's really not much math involved in this. It's just knowing what goes where. All right, same thing. This is the hypotenuse. That's the biggest piece. Go to the short leg first. It's got to be half of that. Divide by 2. So this is 6. Go to the long leg after that. This is 6 radical 3. That's it. That's all you need to do. All right? Now, even if it's some type of fraction, radical, or whatever, it does not matter. This is still the hypotenuse. To go from hypotenuse to short leg, we're dividing by 2. So that's 14 radical 3 divided by 2. What's a better way to say 14 over 2? This would just be 7 radical 3. So if the short leg is 7 radical 3, to go from short leg to long leg, we multiply by radical 3. So that's 7 radical 3 times a radical 3. Remember, 7 goes with that 1, so that's 7. Radical 3 times radical 3 is radical 9, but the radical 3 times radical 3 is the square root of 9. Square root of 9 is just 3, so your answer is 7 times 3, which is 21. And there's your answer. Now, where it gets a little tricky, what if they give you the long leg? Remember, to go from short leg to long leg, you multiplied by radical 3. So to go backwards, you need to divide by radical 3. Well, that's 6 divided by radical 3. What's the one thing you're never supposed to do with radicals? Have a radical denominator? Okay, how do you get rid of it? Multiply it by itself, radical 3 over radical 3. So I have 6 radical 3 over radical 3 times radical 3 is radical 9. What's a better way to say radical 9? That's just 3. Now, the 3's don't cancel, but you can simplify 6 over 3. 6 divided by 3 is 2. So your answer is 2 radical 3. That's the short leg. How do you go from short leg to hypotenuse? You multiply by 2. So that's 2 radical 3 times 2. The only two numbers that get multiplied are the 2 and the 2, so that's 4 radical 3. All right? Same thing. This is the long leg. I got to go to the short leg. How do I go to the short leg? I divide by radical 3. All right. Again, we have a problem. Can't have radical 3 on the bottom, so multiply by radical 3 over radical 3. So what that gives us is 14 radical 3. Radical 3 times radical 3 is radical 9, but that just turns into 3. Now, can I simplify that? Did the 3's cancel? No. Can I reduce 14 over 3? No. Leave it. So x is equal to 14 radical 3 over 3. How do you get from short leg to hypotenuse? Multiply by 2. Now, who gets multiplied by 2? Just the 14 and the 2. So that's 28 radical 3 over 3. You cannot simplify that. 3's don't cancel and 3 doesn't go into 28. That's the best you can do. All right, same thing, just a couple practice ones here. If you're in class, we'll do these in class. So again, the short leg always goes with the 60. So this is short, which means this is long. Okay? Look at number 1. HI is 5. That means hypotenuse is 10. And long leg is 5 radical 3. All right? So GI is 10 and GH 5 radical 3. All right? Get rid of that. Okay. GI is 30. That's the hypotenuse. So short leg is half of that. That's 15. This is 15 radical 3. All right? So HI was 15. GH, 15 radical 3. Clear those. All right. GI is 17 radical 3. Okay. To get down here, I need to divide it by 2. All right, so again, you can leave it like this, 17 radical 3 over 2. All right, that was just dividing it by 2. You can't simplify that because 2 doesn't go into 17. To get to the long leg, we need to multiply that by radical 3. Okay, so 17 times 17 is 17. Radical 3 times radical 3 is just a 3 over 2. 17 times 3, that's 21, and 51. So that would be 51 over 2. So I got a 51 over 2. Okay? Now again, I don't want this video to go too long here. So HI was 17 radical 3 over 2. GH was 51 over 2. You can leave it just like that. Okay? You guys can work on those other 3 at your own leisure. Don't forget, go back and double check. Look for the homework assignment that goes with this. And again, we will review that